Hello everybody, it's Mr. Second Amendment, and today I'm going to do a quick video on how to clean a Glock pistol. So for this video I got my 19X, top recommendation, everyday carry, love this thing. And then we're moving into the Glock 44. Both of these are going to be very similar, and you'll see in terms of how they take apart some of the parts and components. It's just exact copy. They didn't do anything different on the Glock 44. Reason why I'm bringing it out though is there's some certain things that we do have to care about when we're talking about a 22 long rifle pistol of any kind. Even this Ruger SR22. Any 22 firearm is going to be more fouling, more dirt. There's only a certain amount of reliability that you're ever going to get on a 22 or a rimfire in general. But there's a couple things we got to talk about on that. But to get the job done, let's just look at the basic things that we're going to need. Glocks are pretty easy by way of maintenance. Don't require a lot of maintenance, at least the center fire ones, like this 19X right here. So we don't need a ton of stuff. You don't need to do $1 million worth of cleaning equipment. Doesn't need to be like that. So some basic things. I like having a bore snake. This one is a 22 caliber, and this one's a 9mm bore snake. If that's all that you ever have for your Glock pistol, I think you're going to be just fine. But on my 22 pistols, I like to have a 22 caliber brush with a rod to kind of punch out some of the fouling and lead buildup. 22s in general, like I was saying, they kind of take a little bit more maintenance and care because they certainly get really dirty. So we're going to be going over that. We're definitely going to want some kind of solvent or some way of breaking down the carbon, the lead, the copper. This is Hops number 9. This is my #1 favorite. This stuff is good for modern guns. It's good for older guns where you don't want to take any finish or bluing or anything off parts or a gun. So it's going to be safe by way of that, but it's also going to do a pretty good job getting rid of stuff. This is actually CLP. This is G96 CLP. If I could only have one fluid or one type of cleaning agent, it would just be some kind of quality CLP, maybe some break-free CLP or some actual G96 right here. So the solvent just kind of helps, but honestly, if all you had was CLP, you'd be fine with that. We're going to be looking at just standard brushes. This is an M16 or AR-15 brush, but any kind of toothbrushes or smaller brushes, you got a small head, the larger head, you're going to be good to go. Any kind of shop rag or rag that's kind of dedicated to this purpose. There's going to be lead, copper, things in here that you're not going to want to use for other purposes. So any kind of nice rag that's not going to leave lint or become a problem. And then some Q-tips if you want, not totally necessary, but they can help you get some of the carbon out of some of the areas. So let's start with the first step on how we're going to clean a Glock pistol. So here we go. All right, so the first step is going to be to make sure the gun is unloaded, and no matter what caliber or type of Glock it's going to be, this is how we're going to do it. So I always say take a gun, make a gun. So to take this gun, going to make a gun, and that way my finger immediately goes off the trigger. I have this thing loaded with snap caps, but the process is going to be exactly the same. So now we've taken the gun, we don't know what is going on with it. So we're going to release the magazine with this button right there. And when I push that in, magazine drops free. We'll see that there's some, at least dummy rounds in here. So at least we've removed the source of feed on the gun, so anything we do, it's not going to continue to load more rounds anymore. But we still don't know what's going on inside the chamber. And for that, we're just going to pull back, let go. We should have seen something come out. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's unloaded. So I'm going to hold up on the slide lock as I'm pulling back to lock it to the rear. And then we're going to check, and we can see that we have an empty chamber. There's no magazine inserted, no rounds or ammunition. We don't see anything inside there, and this gun is clear. The next step that we have to do with a Glock is we do have to pull the trigger. And this is where a lot of NDs, whether it's police departments, private individuals, whatever, this is where people run into problems because they didn't properly check to make sure that there was no round in that chamber. And we can see there's nothing in there. Let's see if I can get more of a, that's the best lighting I can get right there. So the way that I do this is we're gonna Drop the slide, and I actually have a barrel of sand that I do this in, but point it in a safe direction and pull the trigger. So I'm going to do that right now, just pointing it in a safe direction that somehow, some way, if you were not sure or you thought it was empty but it's not, we're pointing it in a safe direction. So I'm going to put that in my bullet trap right now. Okay, safely pulled the trigger in a safe direction. You'll see that the trigger is now to the rear. The gun has been discharged, and now we can begin to take it apart. So one of my favorite ways to do it is to grip your hand around the gun, just like this. And we're only going to be bringing that slide back just a little bit. We don't need to actually pull it all the way to recock the gun. We just need to pull that slide just a little bit back. And now we're going to be dealing with these two tabs on either side. It's the same part, we just need to pull it down. So I'm going to pull back a little bit on the slide. I'm going to pull down on the two levers, and then I'm going to slide the slide off the front of the gun, just like that. Last thing that we need to do is we just pop out this recoil spring. If you have an older generation Glock or a custom spring, you may not have a captured spring or guide rod like this, so you may actually have some tension coming off. But for a modern Glock, this is just what you're going to have. Just pop it out, and then the barrel just kind of drops free, just like that. And now we have the gun and its major components here. So we have the frame. Honestly, no need to take this apart or do anything else to this. This is perfectly fine, just staying the way that it is. We got the slide, and kind of the same rules apply for this. Not really a purpose or reason to take this apart every single time you clean. Maybe once in a long while, after many thousands of rounds, you may want to get in there, kind of clean out any carbon in the firing pin channel and stuff. But honestly, not really needed to take apart the slide or the frame any further than we see here. Barrel, obviously, that's what we got, and this is meant to just be self-captured like that, so no reason to mess with this either. So now we have the Glock pistol taken apart, field stripped into its major components. So I usually like to start with the frame, and I'm just going to take a dry brush. There's no oil or solvent or anything on the brush, and just start scrubbing what I can see. The 19X, I chose it for this video, comparing it to the Glock 44 just because of the color. It allows you to kind of see where the carbon is going to build up. Let's see if we can get us in focus here. But you're going to see carbon will hang out kind of on the inside right here. Not going to see that as well on a gun that has a black frame, but we can see it really well here on the 19X. Really just trying to scrub any major issues or anything like that. And honestly, the carbon being down in there is not a problem. It's not really going to mess with anything. If you're really OCD about it, you can take a Q-tip and try to start cleaning some of this out. Honestly, guys who shoot their guns or carry their guns every day and often, there is going to be a little bit of carbon in here, and it's not a problem at all for a Glock or most modern quality pistols like a Glock. It's really not an issue. There's really no need to take any of this apart and mess with that. And pretty much just like that, the frame is taken care of. Doing it on the Glock 44, you'll notice internally we pretty much have the same thing, which I think Glock did a really great job on this pistol. Again, like I've said in my other videos, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I just like guns that work and just do what they're supposed to do. And I've had a lot of success with my Glock 44. It's a very reliable, accurate shooting gun and just a great training tool. So pretty much that's it. 22 ammunition will give you some more kind of powder, sandy kind of texture. It's going to be really filthy compared to 9mm or any other commercial kind of powder type. So those who have 22 firearms, especially 22 pistols, it gets pretty dirty pretty fast. Pretty much with that dry brush, I can do everything I need to do. And yeah, now we can move on. Next thing we can do is I'm actually going to take the brush now and dip it in the hops number 9, or whatever solvent you have. Reason why is we do have some parts in here that deal with your extractor, and we also have the firing pin parts in there. Some of this oil just going to soak in right there, we're going to clean the slide face, which is going to be this guy right here, using that brush to get underneath the extractor, just like that. And again, the 19X being, you know, it's tan color, it allows us to see what is actually happening in terms of the carbon, just like that. So really just kind of just cleaning that out, doesn't need much. And then I'll go ahead and take the rag and just kind of wipe all this clean, just like that. Beauty of the Glock, along with other modern duty or defensive pistols, does not take a lot of cleaning. Totally is fine with a little bit of carbon still being in there. If you want to, you can take a Q-tip, just kind of get rid of some of this and the crevices there. Not even really needed. And that is pretty much all we need to do for the slide. And I'm going to go ahead and do that as well on the Glock 44. Just kind of cleaning things out. And again, we really don't have to go crazy here. I think a lot of people, probably at least 1/10 of the jobs that I do in the shop are customers who bring in a gun in a bag of parts that they decided to take way apart, way beyond the field strip or casual maintenance, and wanted to actually take it apart as far as the gun could physically go. And I'm here to tell you that you don't want to do that. There are certain things that, yes, they come apart, not something you want to do every single time you clean. There's also a little bit of carbon and lead and stuff that the gun is perfectly fine. You know, the gun can perfectly live that way with just a little bit in there and it's fine. And I think sometimes guys do more harm than good when they actually take things apart way further than they need to go. So pretty much just like that, and we're gonna move on. All right, so let's talk about barrels real quick. So obviously we can see we got the Glock 19X barrel here and then the Glock 44 barrel. Both of these have what Glock calls their marksman cut. So you got this little bit of relief that was kind of counter machined into the actual crown of the barrel itself. According to them, it increases accuracy, which honestly I didn't really have accuracy problems with the earlier generation Glocks. But it does build up, if you can see it, just kind of like some lead fouling, especially on the Glock 44, that builds up in your muzzle. Honestly, I would just leave that. I wouldn't take like a pick or something and try to pick away at it. I would just leave it, and there's two reasons for that. One is going to be we don't want to damage the crown. For those who know, the crown is just the inner perimeter diameter of your barrel where the rifling actually stops. A lot of your accuracy deals with that, and if we nick or put a burr or damage the crown, we actually just damage the barrel in terms of accuracy. So we really don't want to be going in there with a pick or anything trying to get that out. And reason number two is consistency, and I'll use the Glock 44 as an example. With 22 rounds, there's so much differences when it comes to the different packs of ammo you can buy for 22. Some of them you're going to have different point of impact, point of aim. So maybe you have like 3 bricks of Winchester. When that runs out, you manage to find a couple bricks of Federal. When you switch to different types or grain loads or kinds, a 22 long rifle or anything rimfire I've seen you can actually see there's going to be a difference, although slight. So they have these adjustable sights on there. But that's getting back to the barrel, that these buildups right here are actually just, you know, helping where those bullets are going to land in terms of consistency. So if we went in here and we scrubbed it all away, using even the same ammo, you might observe that your rounds are not impacting exactly in the same place anymore. So honestly, I don't pick away at that. I just kind of let it build up. It's not harming anything. And I think a lot of people would probably do more harm than good if they're actually trying to go after it. So perfectly fine just to leave it there. Now in terms of the barrels, what I'll do is I'll take the bore snake with the brush portion, just kind of double it over like that, get it soaked up in whatever oil or solvent that I have. And you always, whether it's a cleaning rod, the old school rods, or whether it's a bore snake, you always want to go through the barrel as the bullet goes through the barrel. So we want to go in this direction. We would not want to insert rods or a bore snake or anything going that way. And again, that's really just to protect that crown. It's really much more important when we're dealing with rods. And I'm just going to pull the bore snake through. You can see mine. It's definitely had some use, and you can actually wash these. I would not wash them in your washer at home where you wash your clothes, because these are going to be soaked in lead. But you can just kind of hand wash them in a bucket of warm water, let them soak for a little bit and dry them out. And just a couple passes is all that it really needs. And another thing about the bore snakes, and I straight up cut this one, but the bore snake will have this loop at the end, and kind of the intention is to put, you know, if you wanted to put an extra patch on here, just to kind of see how clean the barrel was getting. And I would just recommend just don't put patches on this loop. It's going to be tempting. It's trying to entice you to put some extra material, maybe some cleaning patches on here. I just wouldn't. I would not do that. I've seen a number of ARs and pistol barrels. I've seen things where guys were putting patches and they were pulling it through, and it made it deep enough into the chamber but wouldn't go any further, but then it was too deep to pull it out or extract it from the other end. So I would just use the right size bore snake, and I would not use the loop at all. I mean, it's got plenty of cleaning surface on this whole thing. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for the 9mm barrel. And honestly, that's really just all it needs inside. We're just kind of soaking it up right now. Just doing a couple passes. And you'd be surprised, the bore snake does a pretty good job of just cleaning out the stuff that needs to be cleaned out. Another thing we want to talk about on barrels, for those who don't know, Glock barrels have polygonal rifling in them. And I don't know if I'm going to get a good shot. They've changed it with the marksman barrel a little bit, but it still works on the same principle. And the big deal with that is you don't want to be shooting cast lead bullets out of Glock or HK barrels, anything with polygonal rifling, as opposed to button cut rifling or traditional rifling. So with the 22 barrel for the Glock 44, we want to definitely punch out the bore and use the bore snake. I would say at least once every 200 to 300 rounds, just out of an abundance of caution. Just making sure that we're cleaning out lead deposits and we're not going to cause a problem. So then I like to just kind of clean the face of the barrel here, the feed ramp, everything. On the Glock 44, it's got these 2 channels, so I clean those up as well. And then this one's a pretty simple affair here of just kind of cleaning up the front. Doesn't take much. My brush is not super soaked in oil and solvent, but it's got enough to start doing some work. And then we're just going to take the rag, just kind of rag this off, just like that. Now, when it comes to lubrication, which we're going to get to, just look at these silver locations on the barrel. That's kind of telling you where most of the friction points or where most of it touches, and that gives you an indicator of, hey, maybe I should put some oil there. So clean off this barrel too, making sure everything is good to go, and then we're going to keep moving on. So the next thing we need to observe are the magazines. And again, with that tan color, we can kind of see where carbon shows up. Not really an issue here. There is going to be some carbon. You can take a pretty much dry brush, maybe a little bit of oil or solvent, but we're not dripping solvent into the magazine and possibly causing issues. Just kind of working on that follower. And we'll do the same thing right here. Just going to kind of clean it up. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're just giving it a little bit of attention. And then we're just going to take the rag, make sure the magazine goes free. On the Glock 44, you might want to just bring down the follower, and because you can with that thumb slider, and just kind of clean the inside of the lips right there. Doesn't need a lot, and it's honestly not a huge deal. And this one we already did, so we're just going to kind of wipe it off. We can see there still is a little bit of carbon residue kind of on the exterior. Not a big deal. For casual maintenance, that's pretty much all you'd need to do, just to kind of clean up the mags a little bit. Okay, we're coming close to the finish. So now I'm gonna dip the brush in and just kind of throw some of this lubricant, the CLP. Now again, you could have been cleaning the gun with CLP this whole time. Just kind of finger apply it. Honestly, with Glock's coatings and what they use on their slides and barrels and everything, they're kind of a self-lubricating finish, but a little bit of oil, it's not really going to cause problems, just going to help out. We don't want this thing dripping, we just want a coat of it. And then what we do is we simply just drop the barrel in, and I'll use gravity is kind of the easiest way to go here, keeping the slide open towards the sky, and we're just going to feed the end of the barrel in. And you could even go over travel and then until you drop it in place, just like that. And you'll see that it fits flush. You can check the top of it that everything's flush and it's not out of battery. So as long as we got that barrel, nice and flush, good to go. This spring really doesn't need anything, but sometimes I'll just take a little bit, just lightly brush oil on it. Again, we're not dripping, just a little bit of oil in there, and we'll be good to go. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this end of the spring and we're going to feed that into the end of the slide, and then now just going to be capturing the spring on that ledge. Overall, you should have a spring that's parallel with the slide and the barrel. If we didn't quite get there, you'll see a spring that's kind of, you can see it's canted, it's not totally, and it doesn't even want to really stay like that. But we just got to get it on that inner ledge or cliff, I guess is the best way to explain it, and see if we can get, apologize for the lighting, it's not perfect, but there you go. So on a standard centerfire Glock, that's kind of what we're looking for right there. The last thing that I do is I'll take, again, just a little bit, doesn't need a lot, and we're just going to grab just a little bit of oil on these guide rails right here where the slide actually interfaces. You can do just a little bit on top, and again, we're not doing anything crazy, just a little bit, and it really doesn't even need that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get that slide and we're mating it up with these rails right there. So we start back here, we start bringing the slide back, everything's fine. Now we got to watch out for the ejector, that we're not hitting the back plate of the slide. So we just got to finagle it past. We don't want to get caught up on it right there. We just got to make sure it clears that gap. You can see where that runs. And then now all we got to do is cock it. Again, we're going to put it in a safe direction, making sure it's unloaded, but safe direction. To do a function check, I'm going to do it left-handed here. We can pull the trigger, leave the trigger held down. We're going to charge it, then we're going to let go of the trigger. Should hear the click of the reset. Pull the trigger again. We have a functional pistol that is good to go. All right, and then last step would be just kind of wiping down any extra oil that we had going on here. And if you have a weapon light, you're just going to want to make sure you clean the lens right here. Some guys will put chapstick or Vaseline on there trying to protect it. They actually do make some products to protect your lens from all the carbon blast, but that is pretty much it. For the Glock 44, it is a little bit different, pretty much the same concept. So we're just going to take oil. I see some silver down there, maybe a little bit on the muzzle. Again, we're just going to finger apply it just like that. Now with the Glock 44, it does not use that tilting barrel design like all the other Glocks. It's just a direct blowback. So we're just gonna feed the barrel through the end, and you're gonna bring it all the way back. Now in the Glock 44, there's no moment where it just kind of drops down in place. The whole thing is just flat the whole time. And you can see this is actually how it should be. The barrel is a little bit sunken in on the slide. That's just how this gun is. But there is no moment where that barrel is gonna drop down. This is just how it is, by way of just how it works. Recoil spring assembly, same thing. Just going to throw a little bit of oil on there. It doesn't really need much. Insert the spring into the front of the slide, and then we're going to get it stuck on that ledge again. And just like a standard 9mm Glock, we want that spring to be parallel with the slide and the barrel, so it's not kind of canted or poking out. Last thing we're going to do is, just like we did before, just going to take some oil and hit those kind of rails that the slide actually runs on. Throw a little bit there, it's fine. And then again, we're going to start way forward up here, just making sure that we're aiming those rails right. And we're just going to start sliding it back. Again, we don't want to get hit on the ejector right there. We just want to make sure it can clear. And then again, just going to make sure it's good to go. I actually don't really dry fire this gun, just because on any firearm, you really don't want to dry fire this a ton. So I just kind of leave it. It's not a defensive or duty gun, so you know, I can tell without even doing a function check, I know this thing is good to go. But that's another thing as a side note, any 22 pistol or rifle that you have, any rimfire, you just want to go ahead and not dry fire that a ton. You can actually, depending on the design, you can actually damage the firing pin doing that too much if there's no live ammo in there. So I just leave the Glock 44 just like that, and we are good to go.